Oh my gosh, if you're living in Canada right now, it is extremely humid. It just rained and I am sweating in this room with all this lighting going on. But we're gonna dive into this bad boy. Now, you probably guessed it, it's another Cine lens review, but this one's a little bit more special in the sense that it's more specialized for a certain kind of shot. Let me explain. There it is. This is the LAOWA 8-15 Fisheye Zoom. That's right, a full frame fisheye zoom for the first time. And yes, it comes in a PL mount. Now we're gonna talk about the actual build, the quality of the glass, and some extra thoughts that I have on the actual lens. But let's dive into it. Now, first and foremost, LAOWA has been doing phenomenal in pushing out some really interesting lenses, I will say. And this one is no different, because when they told me that they wanted to send this out and ask for my opinion, I was a little bit iffy up until the point that I realized I actually wanted to use this. Now, as you can tell, this Cine lens does have a PL mount, but there is a couple other options like your Sony E mount, an RF mount, Z mount, and so forth. But what really is surprising is the size of this. Like, look how small this is, and you'll find that this is somewhat unique too. And because of that size, you are getting something that is pretty much smaller than most fisheye zooms with a pretty large range as well. At a full frame 8-15mm, you're getting a insanely wide view. And with an aperture that stops as low as T2.9, it's very surprising, especially with the fact that it is a zoom lens. Now with this comes a full metal body here that is quite durable, as you can tell, but it is also quite heavy. Coming in at a whopping 590 grams, this thing is definitely not meant to be held in your purse. And as you can tell, there is some gears on the front for the zoom and for the focus here, which is convenient, especially for those running those follow focus systems. But what's really interesting is the fact that there is no internal zoom. And I say that's interesting just because of the actual zoom length, where it's not really existent. Like, it barely moves. And you're going from 8-15mm, almost double. So the beauty of this zoom lens is the fact that this doesn't actually move any of the components on the outside. So it's all a internal zoom. So really, if I need to focus or if I need to attach different motors, it won't be affected just because everything is fixed on the outside and everything inside is the only thing moving. Now, despite the fact that majority of my cameras are Sony E mounts, I still requested a PL mount because majority of the users that will actually be utilizing this most likely will gravitate towards a PL mount, and that was just something I wanted to test. You have a flange that sticks out at about 1 centimeter, so if you're trying to adapt it using, let's say, a PL to E mount like this, you have to be very picky. Yeah, so unfortunately we can't be mounting different filters on it just because of how deep that flange is on that PL mount. They do come with an E mount, but because I wasn't sure if I was testing it on different lenses, we decided to run with the PL mount version. Nothing wrong with that. They all work the same, so that's a good thing. Not all my adapters were actually able to fit onto the PL mount, especially if you have a drop-in filter system. That's pretty much a no-go. And if you thought you'd be able to fit a matte box, think again, because there is no threads on the end here, nor is there any space to actually fit one. So it's pretty much just the lens that you're able to use. Now, aside from all of that, the lens itself is actually quite interesting. Like I said before, this isn't a lens that everyone needs, and it's definitely not something that is very much tailored to every single shoot. But when you do want to use it, it becomes very, very cool. If you're looking for an extremely wide lens that has some really cool warp effects, this is really nice to actually use, especially with the clarity and kind of sharpness that you're actually getting from the lens and glass. Now, you do have 13 elements of glass inside of this, which probably is why it's so darn heavy, but because of that, you're able to fit a considerable range in a smaller form factor. And as we all know, LAOWA has become quite exceptional in releasing very wide lenses in a smaller form factor, like the 10mm autofocusing lens, which has become a fan favorite. Now, at 8mm, you will notice that majority of your sensor is blocked out by that black border, which is why it is a fisheye lens. But as you start to zoom into the 15mm range, you'll start to see that it starts to cover the entire sensor. And you'll also notice that there's actually less warping as well. Now you are only getting about 0.23 times in that zoom range, which isn't a lot, but if you really wanted to get that cool, unique zoom in or pan in look while also zooming out, this is when it starts to become a little bit more interesting, especially if you have some cool shoots like this. Now, when I brought it out, I had no expectations, and I actually didn't even think I would be using it on this shoot. But with Toronto popping off in the women's basketball scene, we wanted to actually bring some really unique kind of angles. And that's where something like this really came into play, because we were actually able to use this to create a unique POV and also gather some really cool and unique stationary shots. Now, I paired the Sony FX3 with the 8-15mm just to have a more versatile kind of shot, and using this as something to, one, get a really wide field of view that also still had a nice depth of field. Now, because the lens is so wide, I could barely tell if there was any kind of focus breathing, especially when you have only a portion of your sensor really only filled. So I was constantly trying to magnify on my monitor, but it was really hard to tell. Now, because it is a manual lens, you do have to focus all by yourself, but in the end, it really didn't matter because I wasn't able to actually mount a filter on either side, so the aperture did have to go up, especially in daylight environments. But as you can see, we got some really cool shots. I will not lie. And because the lens wasn't actually released at the time, I couldn't say too much as to what lens I was using, but I did tell my crew this is something that you'd want to check out down the line. Now, one of the more unique shots that I was able to capture was this cool POV angle of someone signing the billboard. Now, I was really inspired by a lot of people online, but I thought it was actually quite present in what we were trying to promote, especially because everyone was signing a banner and we kind of wanted to capture that essence. Now, with that in mind, we also mounted this to the top of a basketball net. That's right, LAOWA. I did not intentionally risk the lens, but it definitely was in a high-risk environment. Whoopsies. It's all good. Nothing happened to it. Don't worry. But because the field of view was so wide already, when I thought I wasn't actually in it, I was still in it. At 8mm, you're pretty much getting like almost everything there. And I thought 10mm was wide. This surprised me on how much I was actually able to capture. Now, that isn't a bad thing, but when you're trying to capture a large environment and you think you're out of the shot, it's kind of just hard to redo, especially when only a small portion of the screen is really showing what you're seeing. So really make sure that you're out of the shot in the next one. All right, so we're gonna be mounting the new LAOWA 8-15mm on the FX3 here. But because this is so wide, we're gonna be running an autofocusing system as well on it and put it right on top of this. This is the helmet cam here. So we'll do some like cool POV shots and see what we can get out of that. You are getting characteristics that are very true to life. Skin tones are clear, sharp, and I will say very commercial-like, meaning there is no kind of like filmic look to it, and you won't get any kind of color casting from the actual glass. And when pulling the clips into post, everything was very clear, very contrasty, and very usable, especially for the kind of content that we were capturing. Now, at the end of the day, the entire video was not shot on this, and that's why I say that this is a very specific kind of lens. These were really great to get some really cool, unique angles, but unless your project calls for something like this constantly, it wasn't something that we were going to use all the time. Now, that's not a bad thing, and I think that this lens was made for those specific moments. It is small and light, and it's probably one of the first with a full frame zoom fisheye. So I will say I was quite impressed on how much this glass actually brought to your shot. And that's part of the beauty of this lens, where you don't have to use it all the time, but they made it very specifically for those times that you do need it, and there was no other option. But yeah, super impressed with this lens. If you wanted something sharp, first of its kind, and something that really brings that oomph to your projects, this little guy is definitely it. I haven't seen a zoom fisheye like this with anyone else, and I'm really glad that LAOWA actually decided to do this, because now that I know that it's possible, it's really cool to see what others can also do, and cool to see how they actually use it as well. Now, I can only imagine that the Sony one is like maybe this much shorter, so I might want to actually try the Sony version just to see how that one's like too. Other than that, if you enjoyed that small little review, go ahead and give a like down below and comment what you think about this lens and maybe how you'd use it, or better yet, maybe try subscribing. It's an option. It's up to you. Now, I actually ended up shooting this video quite early. That means I might be able to go and eat some dinner on time for once. I'm going to do that.